So today we're going to be taking a look at Dominant Tank Police, and it's a 4-episode OVA series that is considered as a science fiction comedy. And before I explain the story, I have a feeling this is going to be another short review, so anyways, let's start talking about the story. So the story begins in Newport City, and there is a division there called the Tank Police. I'm pretty sure you can probably take a guess what they are and what they do. They're basically cops, but they use tanks. So the main character of this story is Leona Ozaki, and she's one of those characters who's very enthusiastic about her work. So when she first joins the division, it seems like everyone there is just goofing off, until they hear about some shit going down in town. So Leona ends up doing her first mission with 2 people, and that happens to be Al. And he's more of a computer guy more than anything. And the other one that she's with is Charles Branton, who happens to be the very macho squad leader. So it turns out they're looking out for 3 people, and these 3 people happen to be Baku, who is just a criminal who will do anything for money. But one thing I found amusing with him is that I do find that his character design kind of reminds me of Barrett from Final Fantasy VII, but, you know, only that he's evil. And the last 2 that are with him are twins that happen to be Anna and Unipuma, who happen to be cat girls. So while the force is looking for them, they just happen to park in the middle of the road, and a car ends up running into them, and the car that runs into them happens to be the car that the criminals are in. So Charles gets really angry about this, so he ends up getting out of the tank and then ends up wanting to check it out, and once he rolls down the window, he gets shot in the face with a bazooka. Of course he has to survive it, right? Well, anyways. The criminals take off, and now that Leona and Al are the only ones in the tank, they have to be the ones to drive it. And because Leona is only used to driving a motorcycle, she's not really used to driving a tank, so she ends up destroying a whole bunch of shit on the way of trying to capture them, but ends up failing in the end, and of course the tank ends up blowing up. So Charles is really infuriated about this since they just destroyed his beloved tank. So Leona feels really bad about this, so what she ends up doing is wanting to take some of the scrap pieces of the old tank and wants to build a newer one, and that's usually the default one that they usually use. And yeah, that's basically all I have to say about the basics of the story. There's not a whole lot to it, but it is very simple. So basically, it's just a bunch of police trying to chase a bunch of criminals with tanks. Now, while the story really isn't anything mind-boggling, the one thing that really does make up for it is the comedy aspect of it. Now, personally for me, I found this show to be pretty damn funny. Just one example I'll explain here that I thought was hilarious is the fact that the criminals end up planning up some traps on the road, and when the tanks end up going over it, they actually explode into dildos. I'm not even kidding. So that's all I have to say here, so now let's move on and start talking about the animation. And the animation here is probably one of the best parts about the show, is that it's actually pretty awesome. So the setting is really cool considering it is a cyberpunk anime. Some really good details within the background, and sure there are some parts that are better looking than others, but it is still pretty consistent. The character designs are fairly good looking, and the tank designs are also pretty good looking. And just the overall animation is just great, so there's not a whole lot of complaints I can say about this. So now, as for the show's music, the music for the most part is pretty good. A lot of the songs do fit the show very well, although there are some songs that do kind of sound like dance music, which is a little bit random. But since this show is kind of more of a comedy aspect of it, then yeah, I guess it does kind of work. And as you know me, I'm not a huge fan of dance music, although there is some dance music that I actually don't mind, but for the ones here though, I do think they do sound pretty good. Same thing with the opening theme song, that's also considered as dance music, and I also actually don't mind it either, it's fairly catchy. So I don't really have any real complaints other than the fact that it may not be like my most favorite thing ever, but it does work for what it is. So now, as for the show's voice acting, and yes, this one did get an English dub, but let me tell ya, it's definitely not good at all. So I'm not gonna go over all the voice actors here since a lot of these ones I've like only done this one role and like that's it. But the one voice that did take me a little bit by surprise was the voice of Charles, and he is voiced by Sean Barrett. Now I wasn't really too familiar with his roles, but apparently from looking them up, he played Urza from The Dark Crystal, a pretty fantastic movie, and he also plays a few characters within the Dark Souls series. So it's pretty cool that he's still doing stuff every now and then. And honestly, his voice for this show is probably the best one, where everyone else in the show is just not that good whatsoever. But at least sometimes it can be amusing for how cheesy it is, and I guess since because this show is supposed to be funny, then, well, I guess it does kind of work, but at the same time, at the end of the day, it's just not that good. So yes, the voice acting is probably the weakest part of the show, at least if you're watching it in English, but if you're watching it in Japanese, then, well, as again, I can't really say much on that. But regardless, I still think the show is pretty goofy as it is, so I guess it does kind of add more to it if you think about it. But either way, it's not good, but I wouldn't say it's like the biggest piece of turd I ever heard. So now, as for the overall score, I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. So I do think this is a pretty good show that is mostly funny, and there's really nothing wrong with that, since the main story of the show really isn't anything all that special, and the characters, well, yeah, they're not really the most in-depth characters you'll ever see, but the overall comedy of it is really what makes it work, and I also just really like the overall setting. And since this is an OVA series with only 4 episodes, and it's really not going to take you much time to watch through the whole thing, which is always nice. So if you want something that's short, simple, and fun, then this is definitely going to be it. So I think it's pretty clear that this one is not going to be super duper amazing and it's going to blow your mind. But it really is just some mindless fun comedy, and I like that every once in a while, so like I said, if you want something that's short, simple, and fun, then I can recommend this one. But before I end it, one thing I will want to mention is that there's actually another OVA series of this, and it's called New Dominant Tank Police, where it has 6 episodes this time. And then there's another one in 2006 called Team Tank Police Tank SWAT 01. That's a little bit confusing, don't you think? And that one's just only 1 episode that's only 30 minutes, and they have a shitload of manga series that separates from each other, but unfortunately I haven't read them, so I can't really comment on them. But overall, when it came to this OVA series, I did really enjoy it, even though I did wish that some of the characters got a little bit more backstory to them, but for the most part, they're pretty much stereotypical stuff, so it really doesn't matter too much, but for the most part, they're still very amusing characters for what they are. But anyways, overall, it's pretty good fun shit.